family. I'm so glad you're here. Do you have a favorite book? Now, I'm not talking about the Bible. The Bible is my most favorite, and that's because it governs my life. But I'm talking about that book that you like to read curled up in bed or in your favorite chair. Do you remember the name? Well, I have one of the books that I love that's one of my favorites, and it's called Proverbs for the People. And I've had it for quite some time, and that's why it's a little dated. But it's the book that I grab when I have some me time and I just feel like grabbing a book and reading. It's a collection of short stories, and they're various authors. Some of the authors are Omar Tyree, Margaret Johnson Hodge, Travis Hunter, and many others. Now, there's one story in the book that's called Ultimate Forgiveness by Tanya Marie Lewis. And it's the story that started my journey in this book, going through and reading all of the other wonderful stories. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I would like to read a little bit just to get you inspired to read it for yourself. And it starts off February 18th, 2001, Sunday night, 9 o'clock p.m. Jared Duncan reached up from his wheelchair to pull down the last poster hanging on the wall of the rectangular jail cell that had been his home for the past 2 decades. The image on the poster held his gaze captive, as though he were seeing it for the first time. A young NBA point guard seemingly floating in midair, slam dunking a basketball. Everything about this poster had changed. The original gloss finish was now yellowed and tattered around the edges, and the vibrant blue and green of the NBA uniform had faded to shades of gray. But it was the muscular athlete on the poster who had undergone the most dramatic change of all. The handsome man towered at 6 feet 7 inches with a bald head, medium brown complexion, and piercing green eyes. His looks had been a bonus to his amazing talent for playing ball. Yet, like the poster, the ball player had diminished with age. The bald head had been replaced by waist-length locks, the green eyes filled with wisdom, and the long, lean legs now rested upon a vinyl cushion, lifeless for the past 24 years. Jared reflected on how a single event could cause a domino effect and change the course of one's life. He took a deep breath and smiled. After 22 years of countless appeals in court, justice had finally been served. He was going home. There were so many people he needed to apologize to, asking their forgiveness for the selfish act he had committed so many years before. His only hope was that they'd be as forgiving as God had been with him. Jared had killed the old selfish child on that poster and became a man of God while in prison. He prayed that Eric, Jason, Michael, Sarah, and Jennifer would accept his plea for forgiveness when the time arrived. The clanking of keys turned in the rusted lock caused Jared to look up from the poster. He smiled at the sight of Burks, one of the prison's most feared guards, entering the cell. At 6 feet 4 and 300 pounds, with a face resembling a pit bull's, Burks intimidated most of the other inmates. But Jared knew Burks' soul was as meek as a sheep. When Jared had first arrived at the prison, Burks had taken a liking to him and encouraged him to follow the word of God. "Hey man, what you doing here this late?" Jared asked, wheeling himself towards Burks. "I wanted to talk before you leave us tomorrow," he said, glancing down at the harsh concrete floor. "Oh, come on now, man. Don't get all mushy on me. I'll be fine," Jared assured his friend. Burks' eyes misted over. "I'm really going to miss you, Brother Jared." "I'll always be here for you, Burks. You know that," he said, lowering his head to hide the tears dangling from the corner of his eyes, seeking a place to fall. Jared would never forget how Burks had helped him obtain his college degree, phoned his attorney on his behalf, and prayed with him when his troubled soul tap danced on his emotions. Well, I can't stay long. I'm pushing it as it is. You know, with Warden Thomas allowing me to pick you up tomorrow morning. I know, Burks. I'll always remember everything you've done for me. A tear slipped from Burke's eyes as he moved closer to Jared. Hey man, let me help you get ready for bed. You know, one for the road. Jared hated to rely on anyone's assistance. He prided himself on the self-reliance he had developed over the years, but his heart wouldn't allow him to deny Burks this opportunity. Sure, he steered toward the bed. Burks walked over and leaned forward, allowing Jared to grab his shoulder blades for support, then pulled him from the wheelchair. Jared's legs dangled as Burks eased him onto the bed, pushing him backward until his back rested against the cold, unyielding concrete wall. Burks wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and backed away from the bed. Jared, I'm really going to miss you, man, he repeated. Jared watched as Burks walked out, locking the cell behind him. Burks turned to gaze back through the bars. I'll be here early in the morning, okay? I'll be waiting for you, Jared smiled. Try to get some sleep. I will, he lied, knowing that no sleep would come that night. Lights out, a guard yelled, and then the block went completely dark, except for the faint light that glowed from the watchtower. Closing his eyes, Jared recalled the events that had led him to this point. Jared had been picked up by the NBA at the age of 18, married his high school sweetheart Natalie that same year, and had become the proud father of Jared Jr. a year later. Everything had been perfect except for his mother, Selena's constant manipulations. He and Selena, which is what she had insisted Jared call her, had always been close. In her eyes, he could do no wrong, and so she busied herself trying to be Jared's friend instead of his mother. She had doted on him, paying little attention to his younger brother Preston, whom she said wasn't cute enough to be considered one of her kids. Jared had laughed at those words, too young and stupid to realize how cruel Selena really was. He made fun of Preston too, while enjoying all the things he could get away with. As the years rolled by, Jared realized that his biggest mistake had been to allow Selena to interfere in his marriage to sweet Natalie. He'd fallen in love with Natalie in the 5th grade and knew even then that there would never be another woman for him. Beautiful Natalie with the petite frame, dark brown complexion, and almond-shaped eyes that reflected his love for her. Selena had never liked Natalie, saying she wasn't good enough, even though they both had grown up in the housing projects. After Jared signed his first multi-million-dollar NBA contract, he purchased Selena her first home and a new luxury car, and had given her every platinum credit card on the market. In just a few months, Selena went from ghetto queen to snobbish, sedity diva, shunning Natalie. Baby, why you gonna marry that girl? With your success, you're gonna have women coming at you left and right. You can do so much better. Selena, don't start. Baby, I'm just looking out for you, she said, sipping her 3rd gin and tonic. I want you to have the very best. Natalie is what's best for me. I love her. You know that, he said harshly. Jared took a deep breath, reminding himself that he refused to get upset over his mother's constant dislike of his fiancée. Okay, she said, handing him a fresh drink. You know I don't like to see you upset. No thanks. He pushed the glass back toward her. I can't drink like that now. You know I need to quit. There's a lot more at stake. Selena, who had been letting Jared drink with her since he was 10 years old, raised a skeptical brow. Most of her friends drifted away because of how she was raising her children. He remembered her kicking out one of her men friends after hearing the man say, Selena, what you're doing to that boy is plumb child abuse. "You mind your business," she screamed. "That's my son, and if he wants to drink, he can." "He don't want to drink, Selena. You're an alcoholic, and you make that boy get drunk with you so you won't have to do it by yourself." The man had said way more than Selena wanted to hear, and she had put him out just like she had all the others, family, friends, and lovers who cared enough to tell her the ugly truth. "Come on, baby. Don't make Mama drink alone. Besides, we can get drunk and make fun of Preston," she said, giggling in her younger son's direction as he sat in the corner, head buried in a book as usual. Jared laughed. "Okay, just one." But that one had led to another all-nighter, and the next day he arrived at practice late and had been scolded by the coach. A few years later, Selena introduced Jared to a new woman, the white girl, Cocaine. Jared was at the top of his game, scoring high, and he was the sole reason his team had gone on to the playoffs 2 years in a row and garnered the championship title. Neither the coach nor the players ever said anything to him about his addiction, as long as he continued scoring. It seemed like the only people who truly loved him were Natalie and little JD. Yet his new loves were gin and cocaine. When one wasn't around, the other was there to shower him with affection. Natalie pleaded with him several times about getting help. "Jared, I'm worried about you, baby." "I can handle it," he said tersely. "This is getting out of hand," she pressed, desperate to reach him. "If you won't do it for me, do it for your son, our son," she begged him through her tears. "I don't need no friggin' help. I'm Jared Duncan, damn it," he yelled, puffing his chest. "Jared, I don't even recognize you anymore. Most of the time you're not here, and when you are home, you're either passed out or getting high in the back of the house. Look, woman, this is my house. You wouldn't have anything if it weren't for me. Your butt would still be living in that roach-infested apartment I rescued you from." "Well, that's better than living in this phony home with a coke fiend," she screamed. "How can you bring this stuff around me, around your son? Don't you care about anything other than your white girlfriend?" she screamed. "I'm leaving." Fear gripped Jared's heart at the idea of his sweet Natalie leaving him. He ran behind her as she headed toward the bathroom, grabbing her arm. "Baby, please don't ever leave me," he begged, easing his body down to kneel before her. "Jared, I'm not playing this time," Natalie relented. "You've got to cut Selena's hold on you. She's bringing you down. Baby, you're a grown man, and you have a family to think of now." I know. I'll get help, I promise," he cried. And with all the love in her heart, Natalie tried her best to believe him. A few months later, Natalie and little JD returned home from a weekend vacation to find Jared at Selena's house, passed out next to his mother in her living room. White powder littered the glass coffee table, and bottles of gin and vodka were strewn about the living room. Natalie didn't bother trying to wake them. She went home, packed her things and JD's belongings, and moved in with her mother. Then she called Jared's coach and told him the truth. Maybe, Natalie prayed, if Jared didn't listen to her, he'd pay attention to the man responsible for having a say in which side his bread was buttered on. The sound of an inmate singing pulled Jared out of his trip down memory lane. His face and pillow were soaked with tears as he turned the top portion of his body onto his side while lifting the dead weight of his legs. Although his memories remained with him, it had been years since he allowed himself to shed any tears. He had hurt so many people, ruined so many lives. In the darkness, he saw the poster lying on the makeshift table in his cell. The man who had broken so many promises to so many people and lost control of his life. He closed his eyes and remembered the night that had changed everything. Jared's outrage at Natalie's leaving and taking JD ignited after his coach confronted him about his problem. Nobody understood, he muttered to himself, speeding to the liquor store. Nobody cared about him and his pain. The pain that had only one cure. He was drunk and high beyond reason or pain when Selena persuaded him to get little JD back. When Natalie didn't answer her mother's apartment door, he kicked it in. "What are you doing here?" she said fearfully, grabbing little JD and pushing him behind her. Selena tottered behind Jared. "I'm here to get my son, witch," he said, reaching around her. Natalie fought him, screaming, "No, no, no, you're high, Jared. Please don't do this," she begged, pushing him away from little JD. Jared grabbed her, pushing her backward into the coffee table. Natalie's hands flailed, grabbing for something, anything to break her fall, and she screamed at Jared's back as he staggered toward the door with his crying son in his arms. Natalie struggled to stand, then hurled herself onto Jared's back, pounding his head. He reached back and grabbed a handful of her hair, slamming her body onto the floor like a weightless rag doll. Jared handed little JD to Selena and motioned for her to take him to the car. Jared turned and looked down at Natalie, who was trying desperately to get up again. Jared placed a foot on her chest. "Nobody takes my son away from me, tramp. You got that?" he snarled, turning to leave. Natalie grabbed his ankle. "No, please, Jared, don't take my baby. Please, stop and think. You're high." He dragged her down the stairs, the plunkety-plunk of her body going over each step, sounding far away. Jared tried to free his ankles from her hysterical grip while shielding his eyes from the rain. Grabbing the stairwell railing for support, he took all of his weight and kicked her off, running to the car and driving off with a gloating Selena in the front passenger seat and a terrified JD in the back. Natalie slipped through freezing puddles of water, running behind the car, her scream swallowed up by the cold night air. "That'll teach that heifer who to mess with," Selena crowed as they sped off. Hours later, Jared awoke to the smells of blood and alcohol, and there was no feeling in the lower part of his body. He heard the doctors and the nurses talking to him and tried to look up, only to realize that his head was confined by a hard plastic neck brace. Jared tasted the blood on his lips and began cursing at the nurses to let him up when he heard the doctor a few feet away in the next cubicle yelling, "Clear!" The older white doctor extended the electronic paddles towards the victim. Jared couldn't move his head, and two nurses assisting the doctor blocked his view. His heart beat wildly inside his chest as thoughts of Selena being hurt rushed into his mind. "Still no pulse," one of the nurses said. Come on, son, come on," Jared heard the doctor yelling as he continued shocking the victim with the paddles. One of the nurses moved onto the other side of the table, and Jared's heart nearly stopped as he saw his son lying unconscious on the emergency room table. Time stood still as he watched the doctor shock little JD's body over and over again. A part of Jared died that night as he watched the doctor back away from his son, glance at the clock on the wall, and pull the bloody sheet over little JD's tiny face. Why couldn't he move? "God, no!" he screamed in agony. Oh God, not my son. Please, God, not my son." And that's where I'm going to end it, because I'd like for you to grab a copy of Proverbs for the People and finish the story for yourself. I guarantee you that it is an ending that's going to be surprising. But Proverbs for the People are a bunch of short stories that have life lessons that are good for us today. And so I think that it's a really good book for you to read, and I hope that you grab your own copy. Again, it has several different stories, just of various topics, but they're all valuable lessons for today. There's one, and I'm not going to read this, but there's also a story called Panhandling, and it's by a Kim Green. And this story is all about a wealthy businessman. He has everything going for him. He has a beautiful wife. He has 3 beautiful children. They have a lovely home. Again, everything that he can dream of. But then he happens upon a Nigerian secretary, and life changes drastically for him. It's a story all about the troubles of infidelity. And so that's another story that if you get your hands on this book that you can continue to read. Again, it's called Panhandling by Kim Green. So this book was also the inspiration of me writing my own book of short stories. In 2003, I wrote the book Inspirations. This is my very first book, and it's also short stories. If you would like a copy of this, I'm going to link below my Cash App and also my PayPal. The book itself is only $5, but the other $5 is for shipping and handling. So it's a total of $10. I think that you'll enjoy it. It's also a bunch of short stories that are valuable life lessons that we can apply today. So that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed Ultimate Forgiveness by Tanya Marie Lewis. And I hope you'll purchase Proverbs for the People. And if you do, continue the story. There really is a great twist to the ending, and I'd like to know your thoughts. So drop me a comment below. And as always, be you, do you, and love the life you live right now.